Masechet Gittin, Daf Vav. We're talking about the requirement of a messenger to say B'fanai nichtam when he comes from overseas to Eretz Yisrael. We're going to start off talking about the status of Bavel. We're going to end the daf on a very famous and important Agadah revolving the Pilegesh Begiv'ah and what exactly the husband found wrong with her. So we begin. Itmar. Bavel Rav Amar Keretz Yisrael Gittin. Ushmuel Amar Kechusa La'ares. So we know that if someone comes from a foreign country, let's say Egypt, to Israel, certainly everyone would agree that the messenger has to say the formula. But what about Bavel? Rav says Bavel actually has the status of Eretz Yisrael and therefore would not need to say the formula, whereas Shmuel says Bavel is considered like outside Israel and you do need to say the formula. Now, what's at the root of their controversy? Lema b'hakami palgeh demor sabar levisha en beki'in lishma v'hane gemire. So maybe Rav thinks that the reason why the messenger needs to say the formula is because lishma has to certify that it was written for her sake, the sake of this woman who's being divorced. And in Bavel, they're learned. There's yeshivot in Bavel, the sages there, the courts there, and so the scribes know, and that's therefore there's no need to verify that it was written lishma if it comes from Bavel. Whereas Shemuel says that the reason why one needs to say the formula is because it's going to be difficult to find witnesses when they are far away. And in this case, it's the same thing. It doesn't matter how learned they are, still, it's on the other side of the border. It's actually under a different empire, the Persian Sasanian Empire in Bavel and the Roman Empire in Eretz Yisrael. And therefore, it will be difficult to track down the witnesses. And so we do need the messenger to say the formula. Okay, so so this would make sense. This is one way of explaining it. However, we challenge that. No, we can't say that because we already established that Rabbah, who says Lishma, is giving a second reason, but actually agrees with Rava's reason that in Aidimisu Kayamo. And therefore, everyone agrees that you need to make sure to ratify the signatures if it comes from any place far away. It doesn't matter where it's from, as no matter how learned they are. So therefore, that can't be the reason, because in that case, even Rav should agree with the reason that en edimisuyin lekayamo and require the formula. Rather, okay, indeed, everybody agrees with that reason of Rava. Of course, Rav and Shmuel are before Rava. We're just using Rabbah and Rava as placeholders to talk about the reason that they express. But these reasonings were already in circulation beforehand. So everyone agrees that you need to ratify the signatures. Rav savar kevan ikad mitibata mishkach shechiche u'shmuel amar mitibata b'gesayu teride. Rav says because in Bavel there are academies, there are yeshivot where people are coming and studying, so it will be easy to find witnesses. A couple of reasons. Number one, there was people always traveling back and forth between Eretz Yisrael and Bavel, sages and other merchants, and they would bring Torah traditions, and then that way they could go and they could ask in the yeshiva, do you know this person, right? Do you recognize these signatures? Also, because the yeshiva is there, so it's likely that if someone did want to come and write a document, so they could come to the yeshiva, and they said, can you come and can you either write the document, or after it was written, can you ratify the document? So it's very simple. We could just send a message to the yeshiva in Bavel. Listen, we have this get. We have these two witnesses on it. Can you help us out and ratify the document? You know all the people there. And so it would be pretty easy to ratify a document since there are trustworthy yeshivot in Bavel. Shmuel, however, says, yes, there are great yeshivot. They're so great that they're actually doing studying, right? That they're occupied with their studies, and therefore they're not dealing with community issues like ratifying Gittin. You have to go find the person, get the signature, right? They don't want to interrupt their studies. and therefore we cannot rely on it. That's why Rav says that the messenger from Bavel does not need to say the formula, because you can always easily ratify it later. And Shemuel says you do need to write the formula, because you cannot easily ratify it later, and you can't rely on the yeshivot who are busy studying to go and take time out to go and ratify a document. Itmar Nameh, Amar Rabbi Abba Amar Rav Huna, Asinu Asminu beBavel, Kes Yisrael Gittin, Mikiata Rav leBavel. And a statement along the same lines, Rav Huna says that we in Bavel, Rav Huna is a student of Rav and Shemuel, who lives in Bavel. He says we in Bavel are now like Eretz Yisrael when it comes to divorces. Why? Because Rav came to Bavel. Rav came from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel, established a yeshiva in Bavel, and now taught many people there, and created these important institutions, and so brought knowledge, expertise, and everything to Bavel. And that's why from now on, Bavel, according to Rav, right, Bavel has the same status as Eretz Yisrael regarding a get, and just like within Israel, one would not need to say the formula. Within Bavel, one would certainly not need to say the formula, and according to Rav, going from one to the other, also you would not need to. Mativ Rabbi Yirmiyah, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Merekim lamizrach verekim kamizrach, Mashkelon darom, Mashkelon kedarom, Me'ako lesafon ve'ako kesafon, Habavel lisfon ederes Yisrael kama dichtiv, Ve'omer Hashem elai misafon tipatach hara'ah. And now we have a challenge against Rav. Rav's the one that said you don't need to say the formula. And it's like, because it's like Eretz Yisrael, here we have a challenge from our Mishnah, which gives the borders of Eretz Yisrael, and it says Rekem and eastward is outside of Israel. Rekem and Rekem itself is like the east. Ashkelon, and to the south, and Ashkelon is included, that's the southern border. Akko is the northern border, and Akko is itself outside the border. Now, Bavel is north of Akko. And how do we know that? How do we know that? Because Yirmiyah chapter 1, when he sees the boiling pot boiling from the north, he says, oh, the evil is coming from the north. Who's the evil? That's the Babylonian army. So you see, the Babylonians come from the north, and they are further north than Akko. And since the Mishnah said, okay, yeah, within Eretz Yisrael, you don't have to say the formula, and the limits of Eretz Yisrael to the north are Akko, and Bavel is further north than Akko, so therefore the Mishnah itself says Bavel is outside of Israel, and therefore one should be required to say the formula. Furthermore, Tanan Rabbi Meir Omer Akko Eretz Yisrael Gittin. Now Rabbi Meir is true, disagrees regarding Akko itself, that it's the city itself, he thinks should be considered within the border of Israel. But they're only arguing on that one city. Rabbi Meir was only talking about that one city because it's relatively close, so it's okay. But Bavel is much further away than even Akko, so even Rabbi Meir would agree that Bavel is outside, and you should have to say the formula. So that was the question. Humotiv la, Rabbi Meir is the one that asked the question, and he also gave the answer. Humefarek la, lebar mi Bavel. What Mishnah means to say is, these are the borders of Israel, and anything outside that comes from outside, you have to say the formula, except for Bavel. We're talking about if you come from other lands, like Egypt, from Turkey, right, from other places, then you would need to say the formula. But Bavel has a special status, as we said, and so that we can explain the Mishnah. Ad hechan hi Bavel. Now Bavel itself, what are the borders of Bavel? So, well, if you want to know, it's the same borders as regarding lineage. In Bavel, the Jews there were very particular to remember their lineage and know their proper proper lineage, that they're from correct, good families. And that's true actually in Persia in general, even in non-Jewish Persia, lineage was very important. So when you want to know, is someone Jewish? Are they not Jewish? Are they Kohen? Right? What are their status? So there are certain borders in Bavel. They were very, very particular about it, and there's a discussion in Kiddushin regarding what are the borders of Bavel for the purpose of saying, oh, if you're from Bavel, we can trust your lineage. So you know what? That'll be the same borders as for Gittin, right? So because that's the area where people are knowledgeable and careful. That's one opinion. Rav Yosef amar Rav Yosef says, no, it's not the same borders. There's one set of borders for lineage, but for Gittin, everyone agrees it's the second arch of the bridge over the Euphrates River. That's the official border. It's not necessarily the same as that for lineage. Rav Chisda masrich me aktesfon lebe ardeshir, lebe ardeshir la aktesfon la masrich. Now we're talking about within Bavel. You're required to say it. So Rav Chisda is talking about two cities. Tesfon is also known as Tesifon, spelled with a C here. Tesifon, but the C is silent. So Tesifon is a very important city. It was in fact one of the capitals of the Sasanian Persian Empire. And right here, it's right here, Tesifon. You see Mehoza, the important city where there was a great yeshiva, is right nearby. It's almost just a suburb of Tesifon. Okay, so Tesifon is a major city. There's another city called Ardeshir, named after one of the Persian kings, Ardeshir. And so Rav Chisda says, if someone's going from Tesifon to Ardeshir, then he does need to say the formula. But if he's bringing a get from the husband in Ardeshir to the wife in Tesifon, then the messenger does not have to say the formula. Let's see why. Lema kasavar lefisha en bikin lishma. Let's propose that Rav Chisda is following the opinion of Rabbah, that the reason to say is because we want to make sure that they're writing it lishma, they're writing it correctly, and therefore, if it's being written in Tesifon, the people in Tesifon are not careful with the law. It's a big, major cosmopolitan city. There's less knowledge there, and so therefore, a messenger coming from there needs to say that it was written in front of me to establish it was written lishma. However, if he's going the other way around from Ardeshir, there the people are more knowledgeable, and we can be sure that they wrote it lishma, and so therefore the messenger does not have to say it the other way around. Does this explanation stand? No. We already know that Rabbah agrees with the opinion of Rava, and therefore would also need to have to figure out how we can ratify the signatures. So, in fact, it has to do with ratifying the signatures. And now, what would be the difference? They're both close by. So, why would there be an issue of ratifying signatures in one direction but not the other? It's as follows. Because the people of Ardeshir, that's a smaller city, they go to Tesifon, to the market, the big marketplaces in Tesifon. And when they're in Tesifon, so the sellers in Tesifon are getting payment from Ardeshir. Maybe getting payment with a check, right, or a deed, or some kind of contract that they're saying, I'm going to buy this. So the people in Tesifon, they know the signatures of the people of Ardeshir, because Ardeshir, they're always coming to Tesifon, and they're doing business in Tesifon. So the Tesifonites know the signatures of Ardeshir, and that's why if they come from Ardeshir to Tesifon, we don't have to say the formula because they can recognize the signatures in the future should there be any problem. However, the other way around, the people from Tesifon, the people from Ardeshir don't know the signatures of Tesifon, because when the people come into Tesifon for business, they're preoccupied with doing business. They're buying and selling. And so, as merchants temporarily there, they have to sign things, but they're not recognizing the people that live in Tesifon and don't know their signatures, and therefore, if someone comes from Tesifon to Ardeshir, so that's the unusual way to go. Tesifonites don't usually go to Ardeshir, and therefore, if a get is coming from there, we need to say the formula, because it will be difficult to ratify in the future. Rabba, Bad Abu Masrich Me'arsa le'arsa. Now, there's other opinions about this. Rabba, Bad Abu would require saying the formula even if you come from one row of houses to another row of houses. Like what you go from one side of the street to the other. Rav Sheshet Masrich Meshechuna l'Shechuna. Rav Sheshet required it from one neighborhood to another neighborhood. Rava Masrich Be'ota Shechuna. Rava required it even within the same neighborhood. Now, Rava, why would he, of all people, require the formula to be said if it's in the same neighborhood? It's only because you have to ratify the document. And if you're in the same neighborhood and someone comes and questions the signatures, so you go down the block and you find that guy who signed it. So what's the problem? Oh, because Rava is talking about his own city in Mechoza, which we just mentioned, right? Rava was the sage in Mechoza. And in Mechoza, it's a port town, and a lot of merchants, businessmen live there. Businessmen and merchants travel a lot for business and for other reasons. Unlike farmers, people that are living out in non-urban areas, farmers stay on their land for generations. So if it's just a rural or a bunch of farms, and it's coming from one farm to another close by, then Rava will certainly agree you don't need to say the formula, because if 100 years the same family is going to be there, everybody knows each other. But we're talking about a big city where people's business is not dependent on land, so they might move for business, they might be traveling. And therefore, one should say the formula, needs to say the formula, so that you have no problems in the future. Rav Chanin mishta'eh, Rav Kahana ate gita, v'layadana misura lenahar da'a, nahar da'a lesura. Rav Chanin once told the following case, that Rav Kahana brought a get, and he just Rav Chanin is not sure if he brought it from Surah to Nahar Da'a or the other way around. But anyway, it was those two cities in Bavel that had important yeshivot in them. Amar sirichna lememar befanan nichtam or la sirichna. So they asked Rav, does the messenger need to say the formula or not? Amar la sirichat. No, you don't need to say it. V'abadet ahanit. But if you do say it, then that's good, better. It has benefit. So what's the benefit of saying it if you don't have to? Because should the husband come and contest it at any time in the future, you can pay no attention to him. It's not going to cause problems. So in other words, it sounds like this whole was brought up by the sages because there were cases where a husband, many years later, even after she's married, is even worse. But even not, the husband can come give her a hard time. He says, "No, I didn't write that. Those signatures are forgeries. Right? This get is no good." And all kinds of cases, and then you have problems because even if you can ratify the signatures, it may take time. It may be difficult to ratify them. You may not be able to ratify them, and then she's going to remain in aguna. So the rabbi said, listen, in any case where it's far away, it's going to be difficult to find the witnesses, then you must say the formula. So that way, it's pre-certified and the husband can't say anything. Now, even though the rabbis didn't require it in all cases, only in cases that's likely to be difficult to find the messengers, you can use this leniency anytime you want. So even if it's close by, you may as well say it, right? Why not? You're sending the messenger anyway, so make sure the messenger sees the writing and make sure he says because it can only help in the future. So once the rabbis give this, it is a leniency because you don't need to have two witnesses come at the time that's contested. It's pre-certified, so it's foolproof. So once the rabbis allow this protection, so you may as well use it anytime. Kedetanya, Maaseh be'adam echad shebi get lifnei Rabbi Yishmael. And we have another story in the similar vein. Someone brought a get to Rabbi Yishmael. Amar lo sarich ani lomar befanai nichtav or any sarich. And he asked Rabbi Yishmael, the third generation Tana, do I have to say the formula or not? The messenger is asking him, so where are you from? I'm from this place, Kefar Sisai. You could see it's right here, well within Eretz Yisrael. And so Mikvah says, Ani, Amar lo, Sarich ata lomar, b'fanai nichtam, b'fanai nichtam, Shelot tizakek le'adim. And Rabbi Ishmael says, yes, you must say it, so that we will not need to find witnesses afterwards. Now, this is surprising because it's in the middle of Israel. So, after that guy, the messenger, left, Rabbi Ilai heard about the case. Now, he seems he wasn't present at the time that Rabbi Ishmael said it. So he only heard secondhand what happened. That's going to be important in a second because of these three words. Rabbi Ilai did not hear these three words. So, Amar lo, Rabbi v'halo kevar sisai mubalat b'tchum Eretz Yisrael, u'kurval l'siporiot, herme Ako. Utnan, Rabbi Meir omer, Ako keretz Yisrael Gittin, rafil Rabbanan la pligi aled Rabbi Meir, ela be'ako demir haka, aval kevar sisai demikarba la. So Rabbi Ilai asks Rabbi Ishmael, why did you tell that messenger that he needs to say the formula? Sisai is well within the borders of Eretz Yisrael. It's even a little closer to Sipori than it is to Akko. Sipori is one of the major cities where the Jews live, where the sages live. There's yeshivot there. And so it's even closer to Sipori than it is from the border town of Akko. And even Akko, we learned that Rabbi Meir says Akko is part of Eretz Yisrael, and Rabbanan say it's not part of Eretz Yisrael, but Rabbanan are only arguing against Rabbi Meir regarding Akko itself, which is far away. But Kvasisa, Sisai, is much closer to the central part of Israel than Akko, so certainly it should not be required. So he's asking Rabbi Ishmael, why did you tell him that? And Rabbi Ishmael, Amar lo shetok b'ni shetok, o'iv yasa davar be'eter yasa. So he says, be quiet, Rabbi Eli, stop making such a big deal out of this, right? Since the matter became permitted, so let it go. In other words, since the messenger is here, and he's perfectly capable of saying it was written in front of me, so make him say it. That way, the document will be pre-certified, and it will be heter always, no matter what, even if the husband comes in 10, 20 years from now, everything will be fine. So that's why it's a good idea to say it. And I told him, yes, you should say it. That was the reason. So you see, this follows up on the previous case, where also, even in cases where you don't need to say it, it's a good idea to say the formula. Now we have a question. Wait a second. Rabbi Ishmael himself said, say it so that you won't need edim. Right? Rabbi Ishmael, in his original ruling, actually said why, that you must say it in order to help the woman so that she will not require it in the future. So why was Rabbi Eli so surprised, and how come he didn't know that himself? The answer is because when Rabbi Eli heard the story, he was outside. When he heard it, they didn't conclude with those words. Rabbi Ishmael did say them, but the person that told Rabbi Eli about the story did not say these words, Shelot tizakek la'adim, in the name of Rabbi Ishmael. So that's why he only heard the ruling. Yes, you have to write it, but he didn't know the reason, so that's why he came and asked him the reason, and now everything was clarified. שלח לרבי אביתר לרב חיסדא, גיטין רבי משם לכאן, אין צריך לומר בפני נכתב ופני נחתם. So Rabbi Abiatar, who is from Eretz Yisrael, sends a letter to Rav Chisda, who is from Bavel. How can you tell? This is an important rule. Everybody should know. If you see Rabbi, then you know that rabbi is from Eretz Yisrael. Where they had official semicha, they called it a Rabbi. Whereas Rav means that the rabbi is from Bavel. So Rabbi Abiatar is a letter being sent from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel, and it said, regarding Gittin that come from Bavel to Eretz Yisrael, you don't need to say the formula. This is like the opinion of Rav that we started with. Now, why don't you need to say it? Maybe it's because the only reason to say the formula is because you want to make sure it's written lishma, and in Bavel they're knowledgeable, so that's why they don't need to say it. Now, same challenge as before. Wait, even Rabbah, who says that reason, also requires the reason of Rabbah, that we have to ratify the document, and now it's coming from far away. Rather, yes, you're right. Everyone agrees that the reason for the formula, one of the reasons for saying the formula is to ratify the document. But in Bavel, there are many people that are going from Bavel to Eretz Yisrael. They're always going back and forth. So we have a question in Eretz Yisrael about the signatures. So we'll just, on the next caravan, we'll tell them, listen, can you ask the people in Bavel to ratify this document, and then there'll be no problem. So that's why you don't need to say it. Amar Rav Yosef, man lemalan Rabbi Aviatar bar samchahu. Now, after Rabbi Aviatar said this, he sent a letter with this formula, with this halachic ruling that when you come from Bavel to Eretz Yisrael, you don't need to say the formula. But now Rav Yosef is challenging. Who is this Eviatar, Rabbi Eviatar? Is he of stature that he can be relied upon? Sabar samchahu, right? Is he a recognized posek that we can just follow his words? ועוד האיהו דשלח לרב יהודה בני אדם העולים משם לכאן הן קיימו בעצמן ויתנו את הילד בזונה והילדה מכרו ביין וישתו וכתב לה בלא שרטוט. And Rav Yosef adds, I have reason to believe that Rabbi Abiatar is not so knowledgeable about Torah. Look at this mistake he once made. He once sent a letter to Rav Yehuda, again from Eretz Yisrael. Rabbi Abiatar is writing a letter to Rav Yehuda in Bavel, and he's talking about the people who go, who make aliyah from Bavel to Eretz Yisrael. It seems that during that generation, there were many people that were leaving Bavel and coming to Eretz Yisrael. The problem is that they were coming maybe because Rabbi Yochanan was teaching in Eretz Yisrael, and he was the greatest sage and had a great yeshiva. So the people are coming, but it was hard to find have a living in Eretz Yisrael, and so these men who were coming to Eretz Yisrael had a hard time to providing for their families. And so therefore, even though in general it's good to make aliyah, but these people were not also neglecting their children. And they are fulfilling, in a negative way, this pasuk in Yoel that they are giving their sons, giving away their sons for a zonah, for something foreign. So not literally that they're paying zonot, but rather they're not taking care of their sons by going to a foreign land. Not that Eretz Yisrael is foreign, but it's foreign. It's not their home. It's not where they were born. It's not in Bavel. And their daughters, they are selling for wine and they're drinking. In other words, they're not being responsible when they're moving, right? It's good, but you have to do it responsibly to make sure that you are taking care of your family. Now, this is a side point. The point here is that in this letter, in which he quoted a pasuk, he quoted the pasuk without scoring. Whenever you write a Sefer Torah, you have to etch in lines to make sure that everything is straight. That's part of being a kosher Sefer Torah. And the law is not only for a Sefer Torah, but even if someone's writing a letter, a document, any document, and they're quoting a pasuk, and so when you're quoting that pasuk, you have to write a line, you have to score and write it appropriately. We know this halacha from Rabbi Yitzchak. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, shetaim kotvin, shalosh en kotvin. B'matinat hana, shalosh kotvin, arba en kotvin. Rabbi Yitzchak does say the details about this law. If you're writing 2 words, it's okay to write it without scoring. But 3 words is already a significant part of a pasuk, and you have to write it with scoring. There's also a braita that says 3 you can write, 4 you're not allowed to write without scoring. Okay, so whether it's three words or 4 words, the point is he quoted here a whole pasuk in his letter to Rabbi Abiatar, and he just wrote it just like that without scoring. You see how he's ignorant of this halacha of Rabbi Yitzchak, and therefore, is he someone that we can rely on for his halachot if he doesn't know this fundamental halacha? Okay, fantastic. This is, by the way, a really interesting halacha that we don't seem to be too conscientious about today. Sometimes we write on line paper and we'll write it out, but sometimes we don't, especially for printing things. Does it apply to print? Does it apply to personal letters? Does it apply to legal documents? Where does it apply? Where does it not apply? This is a big discussion in poskim. Okay, but not for now. Amar le Abaye, atu kol de la yadaha de Rabbi Yitzchak lav gabra Rabbahu. So Abaye tells that Rav Yosef is questioning the authority of Rabbi Abiatar, and Abaye is going to defend him. He says, what? Just because you don't know something that Rabbi Yitzchak says, it means you're not a great rabbi, right? So to be a great posek means you have to know everything that everyone ever said, right? You could still be a great person. I would agree with you if it was something that was based on reasoning. So then, even if you didn't hear of the reasoning of a certain sage, you should come up with it on your own. If you're really a great posek, then you should have been able to figure out that this is the right thing to do on your own. In that case, I would agree with you if you missed something like that. But this is not based on reasoning. This is based on a tradition. And so Rabbi Abiatar didn't know this tradition. In fact, we see over here that not only did Rabbi Yitzchak didn't make it up, there was also a baraita. But not every sage knew every baraita. We assume every sage knew Tanakh, they knew Mishnayot, right? They knew, you have to know the basics of those fundamental documents. But Baraitot, there were many, many collections of Baraitot, and there's people that heard a Baraita that are in some faraway yeshiva, and then when they come, they teach us the Baraita. Even if it's an authentic Baraita, they're not all collected in one place. That is would be easy to know. And therefore, many of the greatest sages did not know every Baraita. So just because Rabbi Abiatar doesn't know this teaching that Rabbi Yitzchak knew, a tradition, doesn't mean that he's not authoritative. And furthermore, Rabbi Abiatar is quoted by none other than HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and Hashem agrees with his interpretation. So he has semicha. He has great authority. He is even quoted by the author with a capital A. So that certainly makes him authoritative. And so now we quote this famous Agadah. Okay, but the point of all this is that Rabbi Abiatar, when he says in the letter that you don't have to say the formula going from Babel to Eretz Yisrael, yes, he is reliable. Okay, so now what is this case where Hashem himself quoted Rabbi Abiatar? Tichti vatizne alav pilagsho. This is the famous and sad story at the end of Shoftim, when there's no Melech B'Yisrael and all kinds of anarchy is going on, and a person, a Levi, went and took for himself a pilegesh, and one day the pilegesh, this is vatizne alav pilagsho, she left him, she went back home. And so from a simple reading of the pasuk, it sounds like she was not faithful. But doesn't really specify. So the rabbis have a machloket. What's going on? Why did she leave? It must be that the husband became angry with her, and that's why he kicked her out of the house. Why? So Rabbi Abiatar and Yonatan, they're learning this chapter of the Pilegesh Begiva. Rabbi Abiatar says it must be he found a fly in the soup. Right? She served him a dish, and he saw a fly, and he got so upset. How dare you serve me a dish like this and with a fly in it? And they got into a fight, and she left, and she went back home. And then he felt bad afterwards, and he goes and finds her, and then the whole rest of the story, they stop off somewhere, and that's where she is tragically raped and killed. So it has a very bad ending. Okay, it all started off with this. Rabbi Yonatan says, no, it was not a fly, but rather a hair. He found a hair on her body. She didn't shave that one hair, and he got upset about that. So this guy was, a little too particular. So now the rabbis are arguing about this, and one day Rabbi Abiatar met Eliyahu Hanavi and asked him, what was Hashem doing? This is found in many stories in the Talmud Bavli. When we want to get an insight into what Hashem was doing, how could anybody know what Hashem was doing? Well, Eliyahu knows. He goes up to Shamayim, and so he can be an intermediary. So if you're lucky enough to see Eliyahu, then you can ask him, what was Hashem doing at that time? It says, well, what is Hashem doing now? And he says, right now, he's studying Shoftim, chapter 19. That's what he's up to. He does a Yomi. And so he's studying this. So my comment, and what is Hashem saying about this? What's his insight? What's his commentary? Ebiatar beni kachu omer, Yonatan beni kachu omer. Hashem is quoting the rabbis and said, my son Ebiatar Even Hashem doesn't have to call them by rabbi, right? They're lower down. And so my son Abiatad, he thinks it was a fly. Yonatan, my son, he thinks it was a hair. And Hashem is like, just like we read Rashi, we read Tosafot, we read Ibn Ezra. So he says this, he says that, debating, right? Who's right, who's wrong? That's what Hashem is. It's an unbelievable agadah, right? Showing that anyone who studies these texts, well, how are you going to study them? You're going to follow the commentaries. You're going to follow the sages. And even Hashem, the authored the whole Tanakh, he himself is dependent on the commentaries of these rabbis. I can't believe what he's hearing. He says, God forbid that God doesn't know. Is there an uncertainty? Could God not know something, right? Doesn't he know what happened? He was there. He remembers what the actual case was. So God is not sure if it was a fly or a hair. Amar le elu va'elu divrei Elohim chayim hen. And Eliyahu answered, both are the words of the living God. So very famous pisukim, very famous statement. This pasuk, divrei Elohim chayim, comes from, as a quote from Yirmiyah. Yirmiyah is talking to the false prophets and tells the false prophets, until when are you going to corrupt divrei Elohim chayim, the words of the living God? Meaning what you're saying is untruths. You're just making things up and you pass them off as if they're prophecy. So this phrase, elu va'elu, is a take on that, to mean that when you have two rabbis and one says permitted and one says not permitted, one says tahor, one says tameh, it doesn't mean that one is right and one's wrong, as is true when you have a true Navi and a false Navi. One's right and one's wrong. But when you have two rabbis who are interpreting the Torah, and each comes up with a different explanation of the words, or a different comparison, or different reasoning, both, in fact, neither one should be considered a false prophet, unlike in the times of Second Bet HaMikdash, where if one group said this and another group said that, one group would say, oh, you guys are following false halacha, you guys are following false halacha, you're not legitimate Judaism, you're not legitimate, and that's why they had fighting and caused the civil war. So here the rabbis are saying, even if you have two different opinions, both could be, both are within the prophetic tradition and both have validity. What's the best way to say that? Okay, even if Hashem was here, you know what he would say? He wouldn't say you're right and you're wrong. He wouldn't say Hillel's right, Shammai's wrong. Rather, he would say, yeah, you're both right. You both have an interesting point to say, and therefore this is the machloket, the Shem Shamayim. So the machloket should continue, and it's actually not good if it's resolved, because each one has a side of truth to it. How could that be that each one has a side of truth to it? Which one was it, a fly or a hair? Oh, we can resolve that. Maybe at first he found the fly and, he was, let it go. But then, and not only the fly, then he found a hair on her. He said, oh, that's it. That's the last straw or last hair. And he says, okay, now you're out. And then it was the compounding of the fly and the hair that actually did it. So it could be that there is an aspect of truth to both. Some say that this last line seems to be added on to the story after, to kind of tone down the story, to say, yeah, they both happened. But really, this line that is their uncertainty is, yeah, one happened or the other happened, and Hashem is dependent on the rabbis. So what greater statement of the triumph and importance of the sages of the Talmud, who are studying the text and interpreting, and to talk about their authority, than to say that even HaKadosh Baruch Hu, when he wants to study this chapter, he quotes these very sages. And so therefore, you see here, Hashem is quoting Rabbi Abiatar, and you're going to question Rabbi Abiatar's authority if Hashem himself is quoting him, saying, my son thinks this, and yeah, he seems to have a good point. So this certainly concretizes the status of Rabbi Abiatar. Okay, now that we brought up this Agadah, let's continue and discuss it a little further. What is this fly in the hair? So the fly was in the dish that she cooked, whereas the hair was in her genital area. That's where he found it. Now the fly is just disgusting, because you don't want a fly in your soup. But the hair can be dangerous. For some reason, they thought that it would be dangerous to have a hair over there. It could cause some, injury. A different interpretation is that both of them were found in the dish. The fly, there is a difference though. The fly goes in and beyond someone's control, right? You could be cooking and doing everything right, and a fly just flies into the soup, right? And so you can have no control over that. Whereas a hair, you can control that better. And so it seems the hair, that if there was a hair in the soup, then that means that she either was negligent, didn't tie up her hair, or maybe she put it in on purpose to annoy her husband. And so that's why there's more reason to get angry about the hair than about the fly. And so it's not just about what happened. Was it a fly or a hair? There's actually a psychological difference of, was it totally by mistake, or was there some aspect of purposefulness in her doing this. Amar Rav Chisda, leolam al yatil adam ema yetera betoch beto, sher pirish begiva yatila leha ba'ala ve'ema yetera ve'pila kama revavot me Yisrael. Now we learn an important lesson from this story. A husband should not impose excessive fear on his household, right? Yeah, he has to be in charge and make sure his household is following correct things and teach them and keep them on a good direction, but not out of extreme fear. And how do we know this? Because in the case of Pelegish Begiv'ah, this husband was way overly angry, and it caused them fear, and she did one tiny thing wrong, and he flipped out and kicked her out of the house. And then what happened? Well, the end result of the story is that she was taken up to Binyamin, and there she was raped and killed, and then they sent a message out, and in the end there was a whole civil war, and all the rest of the tribes came to Binyamin and had a great war, and tens of thousands of Israel died as a result of that story. Continuing on the same theme, Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav, Kol hamatil ema yitera betoch beto, sof hu ba lidei shalosh averot, gilui arayot u'shfichut damim ve'chilul Shabbat. Rav teaches that anyone who has puts too much fear into the members of his household, in the end will violate three major laws. First, gilui arayot. For example, if a wife is so afraid of her husband and she is not clean yet, so she may tell him, I went to the mikveh, I'm clean, even though she didn't, for whatever reason, and then he's going to violate the laws of nidah, or a similar situation in which he will violate gilui arayot. Or if he gets so upset at a member of his household, at his wife or a child, and they run away, and they go to a dangerous place, and then they're killed in that place, the husband is responsible for sending them out, let's say in the middle of the night, and causing harm, even death. And chilul Shabbat. Let's say she forgot to cook something before Shabbat, and she knows, if I don't serve this to him, he's going to be so angry at me. So you know what? I better go and I'll cook it on Shabbat without him knowing. And so when she's so scared of her husband, she's going to end up violating Shabbat, and so that he won't be angry at her. And so you can't be too angry, because in the end it's going to make things only worse. He thinks he's being strict. He thinks he's being tough, but actually it ends up going to end up with terrible and tragic results. Amar bar Hana, בתוך ביתו, ערב שבת עם חשיכה, הסרתם, ערבתם, הדליקו את הנר, צריך לממרינו בניחותא, כי יחד לקבלו מהם. And so based on this, Rabbi Bar Chana says, when we teach in the Mishnah, the rabbis teach that a person should say these three things to his members of his household, meaning to his wife. He should ask his wife before, right when it's getting dark, before sunset. He said, did you take maaser? Because you're not allowed to take maaser on Shabbat, so you got to make sure that you take maaser before. Did you make the eruv, so we can join the courtyard, so we can carry? And then he tells his wife, make sure to light the lamp. Now, so he has to make sure that everyone's doing everything correctly. So that's what the Mishnah says. Rabbi Bar Chana says you should say this in a nice way. Don't come into the house and start shouting and barking. hey, why don't you do that yet? Right? It's so late, and yelling at everybody, but rather say it in a nice way. Hey, what about the lights? Can I help you? Can I set up the candles for you? Right? Do I need to, can I get anything for you? Right? Can I help you to do this? So say it in a nice way, because otherwise you're going to, instill too much fear and anger in the house, and that's terrible. Rav Ashi says, I never heard that tradition of Rabba Bar Chana, that teaching, but I figured it out myself. We saw before, similarly, that how do you know someone is a wise sage? Even if they don't hear a tradition about it, but if it's something that's reasonable, you should figure it out by yourself. So we see Rav Ashi, he was able to figure this out on his own, that one should always speak calmly and nicely. Amar Rabbi Abhu, le'olam al yatil adam ma yitara b'toch beto. Shel adam gadol yatil ma yitara b'toch beto ve'chilu davar gadol. Rabbi Abhu says a person should not have impose too much fear on his household, because one time there was a great sage who did have too much fear in his house, and as a result of that, they served him something that had a great prohibition. Umanu Rabbi Chanina ben Gamliel. This is the son of Rabban Gamliel from Yavne, early Tana. And this happened to him. Now we say, wait, pause the story before you tell us the details. Does that mean they actually served him and he ate something that was prohibited? Even the animals of righteous do not come to an error. This is a famous story of the donkey of Rabbi Pinchas ben Yair. He would not eat unkosher food, right? He would just refuse to eat until they took maaser, and then he would eat. So if even the animal of a righteous person doesn't come even by mistake to eat non-kosher food, certainly a righteous person will not come to error and eat non-kosher food. So ella bikshu la'achilo davar gadol. Rather, that means that he almost ate something that was prohibited, but didn't actually eat it. Okay, close parentheses. Ma'neu ever minachai. And what was that terrible big sin? It was ever minachai. Apparently, Rabbi Chanina ben Gamliel, he was a little too upset, a little too overbearing on his household, and so one time they had some dish, and the dish was not. They didn't have. There was they were serving him an animal of some kind of meat, but they didn't have a piece of the animal that was missing, and so they went, oh no, he's going to be angry because this is his favorite piece of meat and we don't have it. And so they went and they took a limb off of a live animal to put it onto the dish so that he would be happy. And so because they were so scared of him, and now because of that, he almost violated actually eating something of Ever Minachai, all because he would have been they were afraid that he would be so angry if they didn't serve him correctly. If he was so rather better to be less angry, be understanding, and therefore people, the members of the household, will not be afraid to say, "Oh, listen, we had a problem with the meat delivery, didn't come. I know it's your favorite. Sorry." This is okay, no problem. If he's calm and forgiving, then they won't be afraid of him if he's not getting something that he was expecting, and therefore they're not going to go and serve something non-kosher instead. So this is a very important lesson that we learned just by the way, since we were talking about Rabbi Abiatar, and then he mentioned Belegish Begivah and the terrible consequences from that. So we learned here also that people should always say things benichuta, divrei chachamim benachat nishma'im, baruch Adonai leolam, amen ve'amen.